All right, it's gone 6 o'clock, so we'll get the meeting underway. Nalakadij wajak mort kayan karak nijawalila puja. Wejanang wajak karajan, when yiting bula yaya. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. So visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. We are changing the format a little bit for those of you who have been to council and committee meetings before. So traditionally in the planning committee, we've had people speak before the planning item, and that's given the planning committee the ability to ask questions or anything they want to have clarified. With the now loss of committees and going to the council 2 meetings a month schedule, we will now be giving the opportunity for people to speak before the item that they've come to speak on, and for elected members to interact, particularly where they've got technical questions and the person who's at the microphone may be able to respond to those technical questions. You are still welcome if you prefer to speak in public question time, but we will give the opportunity before each item for people to come up to the microphone and speak on that particular item. Trying it for the first time tonight in a council setting, so we'll see how it goes. We have full attendance tonight. We have applications for leaves of absence. Councillor Moughlin is requesting a leave of absence from 15th December 2023 to 12 January 2024 inclusive. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Lorver. All those in favour? Great. Councillor Graham requests a leave of absence from 20 November 2023 to 3 December 2023 inclusive. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour? They inspired me, so I would also like to request 2 periods of leave of absence, 24th of December to the 8th of January and the 24th of January to the 29th of January inclusive on both of those dates. We don't have any council meetings, but so I'll move that way, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour? Great. Disclosures of interest by, Councillor Archibald. Apologies.
I was just going to add, I'll also be want to apply for leave. It's only short, but it will mean a couple of working days, 26th through to the 28th of November, if possible, please.
Great. So I'll move that, and seconded by Councillor Moughlin, and all those in favour. Great. Any other leaves of absence? Good. Disclosure of interest by members for items on tonight's agenda. Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam. Yes, I declare an interest in item C2311-7, the Fremantle Park Centre item. I'm a full member of the Fremantle Bowling Club, which makes me an automatic member of that institution, and I've declared an impartiality interest, and I'll be staying in the room.
Excellent. Any other declarations of interest? Disclosures of interest? No. Cool. We have no responses to previous public questions taken on notice. They were in the previous council agenda. So that brings us to public question time. Everyone I have listed on my sheet has been listed against an item. So reading that, I will go to you before the item. If there's anyone who's in the gallery who would like to speak now or speak on something that's not on the agenda, this would be your moment. No movement, we will carry on. Yeah. Councillor Lang?
Was noting, sorry, that a member of the public's walked in and would be speaking on one of the items and has missed their name on the list.
Excellent. So perhaps what would be good is if at the end of the people who've got their name on the list, I check if there's anyone else. Excellent. I have had no word of petitions, deputations or special deputations. Nope. So I'll go to presentations. Councillor Graham, you would like to make a presentation?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Many of you would know that my brother Alan Graham was a councillor here in 1985 to 1990, and since 1983 he has been writing a book on the pubs of Fremantle and the social history of Fremantle. It's taken him 40 years to get to this point, And the book was launched on Sunday, and it was a very successful event, and I thank Councillor Archibald for attending. In that launch, Alan made a commitment to present a copy of his book to the Fremantle, or the City of Fremantle, particularly the Fremantle History Library. And he asked me to, and I said I'd present this tonight, he asked me to make special mention of two people who perhaps only Councillor Thompson and Councillor Archibald would remember. Betty McKeever, who was the Chief Librarian for many years, and Lorraine Stevens, who was in charge of the Fremantle History Society, who gave Alan great support in his research, and along with the Batty Library and a lot of other libraries. So here's his book. It's out and about now. If anybody likes a copy, see me and I'll organise it. But this book was donated by Alan to the City of Fremantle.
Excellent, and I hope it's a signed copy. And
well, we weren't too sure whether to sign it or not, so I'll get him to sign it.
I think he should.
Should. Okay.
And what a great research topic.
Yes, so it's more on social history as well. So it's pubs and the social history. So there's lots of very interesting stuff in there. Yep. Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Graham. Are there any other presentations? No. All right. I'll move that we confirm the minutes from Council 25th of October and the special meeting of Council 30 October, seconded by Councillor Sullivan, and all those in favour. Excellent. Is there any elected member communication? Nope. That's going to bring us through to reports. So the first item is the planning item, C2311-1, Nicholas Crescent, and I have James Robert Christie listed to speak on this item.
Hey guys, I am speaking on behalf of B1 Homes and the Olver family. First of all, thanks for having us today and giving us the chance to speak about this prospective dwelling. The dimensions of the block, it's a fantastic location. You know, young family wanting to move into the Fremantle district. Obviously, it is a seriously awkward from a dimensional perspective, from a zoning perspective. As B1 Homes, we have tried to be as compliant as we can be, respecting the fact that I don't think that really there could be any home that could be compliant on this block. However, what we have done since the last council session is we have brought in the setbacks from the boundary wall in, so it is not impacting the dwelling next door, which no shadowing, etc., etc. We've also raised the brick up to reduce hips and valleys on the dwelling, on the prospective dwelling. So from a shadow perspective and a roof perspective, that actually becomes more compliant with you guys. In terms of the client, obviously young family, you know, the pressure's coming on. Mrs. Olver is actually expecting and living at her mother's house with her partner. So the frustrations are really there because, you know, they feel that, you know, we've really come a long way in getting this under control. And I ask that you guys have that in consideration when you are viewing the prospective property today, because yeah, this block of land was purchased 12 months ago. These guys, you know, want to get on with their life, and with the unique dimensions of the block, it is going to be seriously challenged for any design. But we do feel that the actual changes that have been made should be enough to get this granted through, and I hope to see that happen. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Did any councillors have questions for Mr. Christie? All good. All right. Thank you. You're released. Were there any other speakers on that item in the gallery? Okay. Well, we'll go to. Cool. We'll go to that item then. So, do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Lorber, and a seconder, Councillor Thompson. All right. Over to you.
I just want to acknowledge that the blocks in Hilton can be quite challenging, as was noted. And at the planning committee, when we first discussed this, there were just we expressed some concerns about the plans that were put before us, and the response I feel has been adequate. It does create more space between the neighbors and all that, and so I'll be more than happy to support this as it's put to us today.
Thank you, Councillor Lorber. Other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Former Councillor Groom and I shared the same view about the original application, which was probably went a lot further than what the neighbour on the corner was concerned about in terms of the closeness of the building to their property. I actually have to say I didn't think that where the closeness to the adjoining property was a big issue, because it was primarily the very back of the house where it truncates and the like. But what former Councillor Green and myself both agreed on was that the layout, particularly at the front, with a garage on the side opposite where the existing crossover is, which can't really be moved because of the trees, was fundamentally flawed, and it should have actually been swapped onto the other side. But that, of course, would have exacerbated perhaps the closeness of the bulk of the building that was close to the corner property. So while I think there is a much better outcome that would serve the applicants far better and would produce a better streetscape and would be more in line with the trees and the like, sometimes these matters come down to, is this application adequate enough? And it did deal with the matters that were being raised in the community consultation. So I'm prepared to approve it, but I do so knowing that there is probably a much better option out there.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Any further comment? Councillor Lorber, did you want to close, or should I go to a vote? All right, we'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous, so that's a decision for you tonight. Thank you. We're going to go to the second item now, C2311-2, which is the Parry Street number 26 development. Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Archibald, and a seconder? Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Archibald, did you want to open debate, or does anyone wish to speak on? Sorry, hang on a minute. I've broken my own rules. We haven't had the applicant speak, so thank you for bearing with my training wheels, people. So we have two speakers on this item. We have James McCallum first up, and then we have Misha Pesnell second up. So if James, you want to come up to the microphone. I'm going to check with governance. I haven't broken any major rules here. It's okay. So you've got 3 minutes to speak while you're up here. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. My name is James McCallum from Charlotte Barnet, representing the applicant, Stephen Hart of SOP Architecture, for the proposal at 26 Parry Street, Fremantle. I'd like to thank the city's officers for the detailed assessment of the proposed development and wish to provide just a short deputation in support of the recommendation. So in terms of background, there have been 4 previous development approvals over this site, 2014, 15, 18 and 22. Each proposed development has been a 4-storey mixed use, with the 2022 application still being valid. This application is an improved version of the 2022 approval, incorporates internal modifications, improves the external facade, and provides an enhanced interface with the adjacent park. The number of units have been reduced. Instead of 8 apartments and 22 short stay units, this application proposes 12 apartments and only 8 short stay units. That's a reduction of intensity from 30 units to 20. We feel that encourages better permanent activation, and the large dwellings improve internal amenity for residents. In August, the City's Planning Committee deferred the proposal to allow further time for the DAC to consider the proposal and to reconsider the amount of plot ratio, which causes the bulk and scale proposal. Deferring the proposal has allowed more of a comprehensive review of the internal layout, proposed land uses, and the final material treatment. This results in a significantly enhanced interface with the street and the park, improved visual interest, and greater activation of the ground floor. A greater setback to the upper floor has also reduced bulk as perceived from the street. We recognise and appreciate the advice provided by the City's DAC, and we feel the opportunity to undertake additional engagement with the DAC has facilitated a better outcome, particularly towards Parry Street and the park to the north. The DAC were supportive of the bulk and scale of the proposal, as well as the changes made to the planning of the ground floor, with the only outstanding matter relating to improving the materiality of the external facades. As a result of this feedback, further modifications were made to the proposal. In particular, we have been more selective in the use of materials. Optimising the use of brick and limestone has achieved a consistent and unified appearance that is grounded in local context and character. The other significant modification made to the proposal in response to the feedback of the DAC and the City's Planning Committee is strengthening the relationship with the adjacent park. This has been achieved by the introduction of an active cafe use in the northwest corner of the site and opening up the northern ground floor aspect of the proposal. These modifications ensure a greater level of activation and a more welcoming presence at the ground level. The proposed infrastructure within the park is indicative only, as shown on the plans. We recognise that an approval for the works is required to be provided by the City, and we would look forward to working with the City to achieve the best possible outcome. So in consideration of the modifications to the proposal undertaken since the meeting in August and the third day DAC meeting, as well as the previous approvals that have been issued for the site, we firmly believe that the proposal is worthy of approval. Happy to take any questions.
Did elected members have any questions for Mr. McCallum? Yep, Councillor Lorca.
On the drawings, it shows quite a the wavy bit there. That's basically where the park is right now. And so, are those proposed retaining walls that you're? Just kind of curious as to what your use of the park there is, and if that was factored into your open space and deep soil planting ratios.
In terms of the activation use of the park, no, it's purely indicative and is intended to visualise how the park might interface with the development. Obviously, we're going to provide a flush threshold to the park and work with the City to actually provide something that is high quality and achieves the vision of the City for the park. But no, that image is purely indicative, and in terms of the deep soil area amount, it's not included, no.
Thanks. No further questions? All right, thank you. The next speaker on this item is Misha Pesnell.
I've just got a couple of questions on the development and the updated plans. There still seems to me to be a shortfall in parking, which we know in that area is already an issue. So that was that part, and also the overshadowing, because it is, of course, very an extra level above what it probably should have been. What's the situation? Is that having a step back on the top floor? I haven't actually seen the updated or revised plans, but that was a question around that. I think the activation for that park is excellent because that needs that, and I think it will clean up the things that happen in that park. So that's a really good point. But yeah, if we could just understand a bit better about the shortfall of parking and the overshadowing, that would be great.
All right. I might get a response on that now before we go into the debate, if that's okay with the manager.
So the parking shortfall has been assessed. It is within a city centre zone, so there is, in officers' view, sufficient parking on site for the dwellings and the small cafe, in addition to the public parking facilities nearby for short-term visitors, as well as public transport as well. In terms of the overshadowing, the way overshadowing is calculated under the the R codes is to the southern property, which at the moment is the former dentist office. So in terms of the overshadowing level of compliance, it is technically compliant. In terms of the setback to the rear, which I'm assuming you may live to the rear of this property, it's not substantially different to the previous set of plans that were put to council.
Thank you for that response. All right, because of my slight procedural error, this has been moved and seconded. So it's been moved by Councillor Archibald. It's been seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Any debate on the item? Councillor Thompson?
It's just a question, Madam Chair. I note in the documentation it refers to the possibility of the future of a change of use from tourist accommodation to permanent accommodation, and the indication that it would need some sort of council approval. Why was that not included in the conditions for approval? Or is it possible to include those?
Yeah. Oh, sorry to interrupt. I'll ask the manager to respond to that.
I'm not quite sure where that comment was from through you, Chair, but the site is in a mixed-use zone, and there's a density they're capable of achieving of being R60. To get to that R60 density, they need to have an element of commercial, which at this point in time is the tourist accommodation units. So if the applicant were to seek to change those tourist accommodations to permanent dwellings, they would need to lodge a planning application, and it's very likely we wouldn't support that because it wouldn't meet the density which would default to an R25. So they'd be seeking significant discretion, and we simply wouldn't be able to approve it.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, just a quick thank you to the applicant, because I recall us coming through a few months back, and what wasn't happening or what wasn't utilised was the biggest asset for the site, and that was the public space next door. And it was touched on by one of the neighbours. It's the opportunity to really activate and bring some life to the park. So I want to just thank the applicant for taking some of that feedback on board and coming back with something that really works for Queen Square.
Thank you. Councillors, any further comment? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to touch on the issue of the mixed-use zoning. I guess we're in a situation where we actively would like to change the mixed-use zone as it currently stands in the scheme, but we can't do that immediately. It'll take some time in any case. So all of these applications that are using the mixed-use zone requirement are coming in a little bit like this. But if we change the zoning either of mixed-use areas, so we change the formulas, and or we were to include that side of Parry Street into the city centre zonings, then the outcomes in the future could be quite different. So it doesn't lock someone down forever. It really, a future change just has to be compliant with the scheme of the day, not the scheme that we have right here, right now. So I guess that gives the applicant some hope that down the track they would be able to be more flexible with whether they're short stay or permanent residents. In terms of the park, I think that's the other major element, as Councillor Lang just said. The previous schemes did, and this one also does, show an indicative layout to the park. That is not part of this planning approval. The layout of the works that would be needed in the park to create the sort of alfresco opportunities and activation of the park that's needed are still going to be things which need to be basically gone through with our park staff and our engineering staff to make work. We have to come up with a scenario that works both for the developer in terms of their functions, but also still maintains the look of the park as a genuine public open space that anybody is able to utilise. And that's a little bit challenging, not so much at the street, but towards the rear of the site, because there is about a metre difference between the footpath and the back of the park. Even though it looks very flat, it is a little bit deceptive. But I'm pretty confident that there will be a solution in there somewhere. reminds me a bit of the Market Street Piazza, where we've got that change of level between the road and the adjoining restaurants and the like. That there will be a way of doing it that people still read the space as being genuinely public. But I think it's something that elected members will probably want to keep a close eye on because getting that right is going to be really crucial, both for the developer but also for our community.
Thank you. I echo those sentiments. I think one of the points of confusion also in the public debate on this has been, is it a hotel? I think what is really encouraging about this is a lot of it is residential, and we are looking at more residential in the city area, which we know is in absolute demand at the moment. So I very much hope that this is the plan that actually gets built soon. All right, are we ready to go to a vote on this one? I can't really reopen questions now. I'm sorry, so it might be best if you stay back or talk to planning officers tomorrow, if that's helpful. So once we're in debate, I can't go back to the public gallery. All right, so we're going to go to a vote on this one. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, we've got one more item, and know we've got people in the gallery for, and I believe we have got someone else who's not on my sheet for this one, was what I understood earlier. So this is South Terrace number 223, partial change of use to the art gallery. So I've got Ian Kerr listed, I've got Sarah May Baxter listed, I've got Paul Burnham listed, and I think there's another person also who would like to speak on this one. Possibly we'll go to them at the end. All right. Ian, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. It's good to be back after a short hiatus. In 14 years as a local government councillor, I learned to be very sceptical about development refusals that relied on black letter application of planning regulations, especially when they were based on just one such rule. Planning rules are generally based on the norm, but have to be interpreted in context, particularly when the application is for an innovative way of using land. The most contentious of these black letter rules are often those relating to amenity, including noise, and to parking. Now, as a transport planner, I'm well aware that the concept of minimum parking requirements dates back to about the 1950s, 1960s, and is based on US Institute of Transportation Engineers observations about trip generation rates in suburban USA, and the assumption that the site should be self-contained with adequate parking. Now, whilst this might be appropriate for standalone businesses in suburban locations, the number of bays required will be far too high for multi-use inner urban locations with better access by walk, cycle, and public transport, and particularly where we are also trying to reduce reliance on the private car. Now, note that LPS 4 classifies art gallery under exhibition centre, which I find a little strange in its own right, but there is no specification of parking requirement for this category. So under clause 4.7.1 brackets C of LPS 4, it states where parking provisions are not prescribed for a particular use, the requirement will be determined by the council. The agenda report uses a rate of 1 bay per 30 square metres, but this rate doesn't appear against any other land use except office, which I would contest is a very different land use from art gallery. So under this, it would be equally be open to council to adopt a lower rate, even down to 0. So I find it very strange with regard to the specifics of this item that a small art gallery should be recommended for refusal on the basis of car parking. I live opposite one small gallery. Mind you, it's currently out of use, but it was operating for quite a while, and almost above another. Most of the time when they are open, there are only a few people at the venue, and even when there is an opening, there is no observable detrimental impact on parking in the vicinity, nor is there any impact bar low-level voices on residential amenity. So as a local resident, I urge Council to reject the officer recommendation and approve this application, if necessary, deferring it to allow officers to draft an alternative motion for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Are there any questions for Mr. Kerr? Nope. Okay, the next person I have on this one is Sarah May Baxter.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sarah May Baxter. I'm the owner of the Terrace Greenhouse at 223 South Terrace, South Fremantle. As former residents of the area, we know it well, so we took the chance to buy the old building. I'm sure you're fully aware that it was in a terrible state when we bought it last year. It had been in disrepair for almost 35 years, and it was a sort of an eyesore and a magnet for antisocial behaviour. We've completely renovated the site and the old building, and we've transformed the space into a boutique plant, gift shop and art gallery. Big Rigs, which is an established local burger restaurant, now leases the front corner building. We have brought life back into a neglected part of South Fremantle and greatly enhanced the streetscape by retaining and restoring the iconic corner building. By renovating the old building, we have brought economic development to the area, and this has had a knock-on effect with other businesses in the street. You only have to look across the road of South Terrace to see the refurbishment of Maharaja's site. And we've brought diversity into the area. There is now a community radio station next door to us, and the new space we've created is enjoyed by locals as well as interstate and overseas visitors. We showcase the work of local creatives in the shop and the gallery. In fact, the majority of artists who rent the gallery space come from Fremantle and the surrounding areas. At the moment, Artesia is renting the space, and the curator, Anna Cananaris, lives in Atfield Street, South Fremantle. The previous artists were the Tarks, and they live in Tuckfield Street in Fremantle. And the next exhibition is a group show called Human Nature, and the artists live in Hamilton Hill, Hilton and Beaconsfield. The art gallery is used predominantly by the local community, and they love the space and are fully supportive of it. Many of whom can be found on opening nights, enjoying the camaraderie of other residences. I personally have had so many positive comments from local people saying what a wonderful job we've done, how good we are for the area, and how much they enjoy the space. We have an opening night approximately once or twice a month, generally between 5 and 8 p.m, and everyone is off-site by 9 p.m. The art gallery greatly enhances South Fremantle and helps to cement Fremantle as the creative city. Throughout the renovations, we have been mindful to be code compliant, and we have put in 5 additional toilets for the art gallery, of which 2 are ambulant and 1 is disabled. We provide 4 generous parking bays at the back of the building, including a disabled bay. And for example, Melville Aged Care come every month with their aged residents in a support vehicle so that their residents can enjoy the exhibition with their carers.
Ms. Baxter, I'll have to wrap you up there because that is 3 minutes, but I will let elected members ask any questions that they might have. Are there any questions for Ms. Baxter? Nope. Okay, well, I think the next speaker can probably pick up anything you've left off there. So the next speaker is Paul Burnham.
Thank you. I'm the architect for the property. The building has been conspicuously commercially vacant, as explained, for over 30 years. The owners have a history in the arts, identified a genuine need for a small, versatile local exhibition space. It's been extremely well received and is actually fully booked for 2024. I intervened and advised the owners that there is a particular distinction between commercial use and exhibition, which is enacted because of the term public assembly. So under the Building Code of Australia, where public assembly applies, it changes from a Class 6 use to what's called a Class 9B use. I explained this to the owners and they agreed to act responsibly on this, made the application, which has triggered this car parking assessment and identified a shortfall. Currently, the space is approved as Class 6 and does not require any further car parking to be able to be used as a variety of things, which include an office, reception centre, veterinary centre, medical centre, club premises, bank, place of worship or educational establishment. Class 9B is a particularly tenuous distinction in commercial and hospitality development. As I said, it applies to assembly. Most commonly, the trigger for 9B is when you have live music or a dance floor. The Building Code of Australia actually ties itself up in knots in trying to define this distinction between Class 6 and Class 9B. So we're only here because of this distinction, which is assembly, the word assembly. Clearly, the use of the building under Class 6 or Class 9B will not vary the number of people to be able to be accommodated in space and will absolutely have no impact on intensification of car parking demand. Local planning scheme, local planning policy allow for relaxation of car parking space or a potential cash in lieu payment according to the availability of car parking in the locality and availability of public transport. The property is served by 5 public bus routes, including the new 532 bus service, which runs every 15 minutes. The property is centrally located in an active hospitality strip along South Terrace. The locality features a number of successful hospitality venues. When a parking shortfall is identified, the council may impose the cash in lieu system. Since 2013, cash in lieu was suspended within the Fremantle Activity Centre, which extends to within 250 metres of the property. It is also noted that cash in lieu is not usually invoked other than in specific areas. Furthermore, cash in lieu can only be used to actually create car parking spaces in the locality. There is a very clear and a very strong demand for a small creative space in South Fremantle. The owners have received substantial support and continued ongoing inquiries for the space and not one complaint. The immediate South Terrace precinct is part of a vibrant locality with an expectation of activity. A reclassification from Class 6 to Class 9B will have no impact on the potential patronage of the space. A refusal will exclude any possibility of a small art space and render the space open to other commercial use without the obvious community benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Burnham. Any questions for Mr. Burnham? Okay. Are there any other speakers in the gallery on this item who wanted to say something? If there's anyone else in the gallery who does want to speak on an item, I just ask you to raise your hand now and I'll get agendas and minutes to come and identify. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Right. So I understand you're both wanting to speak on Daly Street. Would that be correct, the next item? Great. All right. So we will add you to that one and leave you alone for now. Good. All right. So we have the officer's recommendation on the screen. We have 2 alternative recommendations submitted by Councillor Lang and Councillor Sullivan. So I will leave it to the floor to decide which recommendation we would like to move and debate. So Councillor Lang, you would like to move your alternative recommendation, I think. And do we have a seconder for that? Councillor, it's going to get me, isn't it, Van Dawson? Thank you. All right, over to you, Councillor Lang.
Thanks. Without repeating what the speakers in the public have said already, I believe we should be supporting the arts in Fremantle. And having actually gone to one of the, I think it was the initial opening I went to, I noted that most of the people there were actually people from the neighbourhood that had walked or ridden their bike. And that seems to be the pattern with many of the exhibitions that occur in South Fremantle. Sticking rigidly to our parking policy, if you've been to a gallery opening, the first night is when everyone attends and then the crowd trickles out over the coming weeks. But to expect to maintain a certain level of parking when the crowds do dissipate over the following weeks, I think perhaps is a little bit too rigid. And given that the neighbours are attending, we've got ample parking on Marine Terrace, which is 50 metres away, where we could encourage people to park there instead. And we've also got the 532 running every 15 minutes and an opportunity for people to ride their bikes to the site. So I think all those things considered, the impact on parking may not be as bad as perhaps anticipated in the parking policy.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Lorver?
Yeah, I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation put forward by Councillor Lang. I want to thank him for putting the words together. It seems to me that this is a great use of that space, and thank you guys for revitalizing that corner. I just wanted to mention on the parking, one thing that I was at a JDAP meeting where parking requirements for a different development, they actually did parking in tandem, and that little space between the building and the neighbors is just wide enough as a parking bay. So you probably could fit some more cars on there, officially or unofficially. So I'm not that concerned about the lack of parking for this specific use. So yeah, I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation put forward by Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Councillor Lorver. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. And this has been a challenging one for me, and I've spoken to my Coastal Ward colleagues about it as well. Challenging not because of the gallery use, we're all absolutely supportive of it, but challenging because as a former South Ward councillor, probably the number one or number two issue that's regularly discussed in precincts is parking and the proliferation of South Terrace as a very active commercial space, primarily focused probably more on the pubs than it is on the sorts of activities like the ones on this site that serve the local community. But parking has been an overwhelmingly important issue for the local community as it impacts the side streets increasingly. Now, we can argue that well, there's plenty of parking on Marine Terrace. Why don't people just go and park there? But what they do is they typically look for a car park on South Terrace. If there's not one on South Terrace, they'll drive down the side street nearest to wherever it is that they want to go and they'll park down there. Now, I know that because I live in one of the side streets, and I'm very grateful that Big Rigs has moved from my corner to the next corner because they're probably all parking in the next street now. So all the big burly blokes that go to Big Rigs aren't hanging out in my street munching on their burgers. But that aside, when you look at this site, and I originally, obviously, we all were very happy that both bits of land were purchased together because that potentially created the prospect of a coordinated development over a larger piece of land. And what the owners have done is fantastic in bringing back the house and getting it, the house and the commercial space and getting all of the three different uses up and running. But it has also then left the potential for the development next door, if that land is sold, to be a little bit more piecemeal than perhaps it could have been if it was a coordinated development. Coordinated developments typically end up with coordinated parking approaches, and we had the prospect of not having any crossovers on South Terrace. We had the prospect of being able to increase car parking, public parking on South Terrace to offset the fact that it isn't actually a great idea for each of these individual sites to offer public parking because they can only really offer a few anyway, and it's better to get most people parking in the public realm off from the side streets. So there was a bit of a challenge in my mind as to what was the right balancing act for this site. So we do have to look at it only as the one site, not the two sites, from a planning perspective. We can't tie the two together, even if that would be a desirable outcome. And the site originally, before this, the new owners purchased it, basically had approval for 5 car bays at the back, but realistically, if you do a parking plan across it, it can only ever have 4. But it had approval, for the original restaurant had approval for 5 bays, but it also subsequently, when they built the additions to the side, still had a crossover to South Terrace and 2 bays there as well. So it actually had approval for 7 bays all up. It's gone realistically down to 4 now. So we're actually seeing a reduction. And I only raise that because it's very important in Councillor Lang's proposal that the crossover on South Terrace is closed and that that gives us an opportunity for an additional bay to be created in South Terrace. And it's not only an additional bay, it will actually afford about a bay and a half, and the half a bay will get used for bike parking and the like. So it really helps the amenity of that area. In fact, we might even decide to use a whole bay and a half for bike parking instead of the car bay. Whatever we do, it will be a better outcome because it'll be in the public realm. I would also just say that I had felt that perhaps we should have required this application to provide some temporary parking on the adjoining lot via an access way through the rear, and to give that vacant site next door the opportunity to use rear access rather than having to rely on its own crossover into the future. One of the things I would kind of urge the applicant and whoever might buy the block next door to think about too is the zoning of the two sites. They're mixed use zones. So if someone wants to build residential there and achieve a reasonable yield on it, they will need to use the mixed use clauses, which means they'll have to have 25% commercial space. Well, this site has 100% commercial space, and it would be far better, I think, in terms of an overall development if the adjoining lot was 100% residential, and that could only happen with the density that we're trying to achieve if they still do the planning application as a coordinated development rather than selling them off and then coming along and going, oh, okay, the rules are pretty restrictive just on the smaller lot. So I was wanting to encourage the applicant to seriously work with anybody who buys the adjoining bit of land to actually do it in a way that gets that coordinated development outcome. But it does seem that it would be too onerous to demand that as part of this application, which is really only just dealing with the last bit of the three uses, the gallery space, which is a very successful space. I've been there multiple times. Doesn't cause anybody any grievous concerns that I've heard of. So I'll support Councillor Lang's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Do I have to do anything special? Can I start speaking?
Start speaking.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Sullivan's points on the fact that parking has come up a lot in Coastal Ward, and especially when I was doing door knocking, it was probably the #1 issue that people wanted to talk to me about. And so it is something that I know will become a big theme and was tricky in this application, and also in terms of how we increase the density and revitalise, but balance that with the fact that residents are getting increasingly frustrated at the lack of parking. But I'm really supportive and happy for Councillor Lang's alternative recommendation. And I also wanted to say that I think it's great that there's been those accessible toilets and the Acroad Bay included in the design up to now, because we do have a lack of Acroad Bays and accessible toilets in Fremantle and South Fremantle. So I just wanted to say thank you for including those, and it's really great to see that equity in our art spaces.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any further discussion on the recommendation? No, I too support Councillor Lang's alternative recommendation. I think it is an issue, but it's not likely to be hugely exacerbated by this particular use, despite the need to have it specially approved under the planning law. But I think Councillor Sullivan's point should be heard and understood. We really do want this part of South Terrace to work well, and the more we can integrate developments, particularly where they're adjoining, look at rear access ways, those kind of things, the less we have a contested public domain, and the more we can all just enjoy a peaceful, calm, street with places for people and places for bikes and places for pedestrians, without crossovers and cars trying to compete for that space. So, Councillor Lang, did you wish to close, or should I pop it to a vote? All right, let's put this alternative recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? That appears to be unanimous. Good job, Councillor Lang. All right, that moves us on. We might quickly just deal with the information report and then we'll go to the lease on Daly Street. So I'll ask for someone to move the information report. Councillor Lorber, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Any debate on the information report? I'll put that one to the vote. All those in favour? Excellent. So that brings us to Daly Street. We've got the officer's recommendation and 2 proposed amendments. So I'll look for someone to move the officer's I'll go to the public gallery. See, I caught myself then. I'm getting better at this. It's like on-the-job learning. So I believe I've got 2 speakers for this one. One of whom I recognise, one of whom I don't. So come up to the microphone, let us know who you are, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, Councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm Rob Wall, Fremantle resident, known to a few councillors from years gone by when I was involved with the Bicycle User Group. I'm here as an individual to lobby council to work with the private industry because the climate change and environmental issues we all face are not the responsibility of government or individuals or corporations, where everyone has to work together, and this is a classic case. So when I and most people I know go shopping in Fremantle, we'll walk or ride our bike just because it's quicker and easier. You don't have to park. It's a lovely experience, and it's you go to Galati's, take your bike, walk, come home. And this philosophy doesn't have to just be for those of us lucky enough to live right in the centre of Fremantle. That thinking needs to extend outwards. So the way to make that happen is to make it as convenient and easy as possible for people to, say, take a bike to the LD Woolworths precinct, which is the area we're talking about right now, if I understand you. There's a wonderful path to the south of that with some beautiful trees. It's a nice experience. It might take 5 minutes longer than driving, probably not. And, you can carry a backpack with your groceries. But what we can do is make this easier. So there's an opportunity here with this development, I think, if I understand Aidan correctly, for council to leverage our influence over a private developer and say, we don't have the funds to necessarily put in another bike path. Ratepayers have only got so much, and Fremantle's been very generous in the last decade with bicycle funding, but it can only go so far. And this seems like an opportunity to be able to add a piece of missing bike infrastructure without dipping into ratepayer funds. And finally, I just noted that I found a piece of paper down there when I was cleaning out the spare room, which was a map done by the Fremantle group showing all of the key activity areas and all of the key transport links. And this was in 2014, and I think former councillor Sam Wainwright was in that room at the time in the old council building. And there was a red pen marking a key missing linkage from that path to the then Woolworths site, now kind of LD and others. So this is perhaps an opportunity to fix a problem that's been there for a while. And yeah, that's my comments. And thank you, Councillor Lang, for alerting me to the issue, to the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Wall. Any questions? My only question is if you'd like to give Councillor Lang a copy of that document, it might be easier for us to get it from him than find it in our own archives. So it sounds like a useful thing to have a look at. And our next speaker, Paul.
Hello, I'm Paul Loring, keen cyclist, member of the Bug. And in fact, the Mayor and a few of the councillors and I and a number of others did a recent tour of the city looking at the cycling infrastructure within the city. And one of the things that stood out from that is the difference between riding on roads and riding on paths. And that I, as an experienced cyclist, am happy to ride on the road, but for most people, particularly visitors to Fremantle, paths are the safest way for them. And so anything we can do to increase people coming into the town has got to be worthwhile. In this particular case, the path that leads into, that goes from Hampton Road down through the tip site to South Beach is regularly used by many, many cyclists. And And if they had a direct route from that path then to the South Fremantle shopping centre, I'm sure it would get use. That's, as I say, it's a busy route, and I think there'd be absolutely no doubt that it would be a benefit to our network of cycling and walking infrastructure. So in general, I support this idea very, very strongly. I do have one concern about the whole process, though, and that is that the actual land we're talking about, which I describe as a bit of a dogleg, the dogleg part that points towards the northwest is going through green space, and I don't see why we should be using green space for car parking. There is very little of it there. We've done a lot of work in replanting that whole area, and as a local resident, and we need more of it. We need more green space, and we've always had our eye on the fences of that whole area being pulled down, and that being a natural part to the land that we've revegetated over the last 5 or so years with Aidan's assistance and several others. We've transformed that whole area by revegetating, and what I would like to see is that green space to the east of Daly Street, between Daly Street and the shopping centre, that we were actually to turn that whole area into much better used green space. And then that the pathway itself would be part of that whole change. So I think we should limit the parking to the block to the east of that southeast rectangle, get rid of the dog leg, and then start to plan for what we're going to do with that whole green space, including having a bike path. Have I explained myself adequately? It's a bit difficult when we haven't got a map.
I'll see if there are any questions, but that is 3 minutes, so I'm not sure if there are any questions. No, that's great, thank you. Were there any further speakers on this item? There's other people in the gallery for this. You are welcome to have your say now. We do have a couple of amendments on the table. So I will get a mover, I think that's where we were, for the officer's recommendation. Councillor Lang is moving the officer's recommendation. A seconder for that one? Councillor Graham. All right. Did anyone wish to speak on the officer recommendation, or we might see if we can go to the amendments? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just sort of setting some corporate memory on this whole area. The trees that we're looking at are actually trees that I planted with others in around about 1996, I believe. The planting of that area was hard fought. The money for it came from a fine that was paid by the owner of the shopping centre when they demolished the cliffs, the natural limestone cliffs that were there, and that paid for the landscaping of the area. But the EPA wouldn't let us landscape most of the old Daly Street tip. They would only let us landscape tree plant certain edges in certain locations. The planting was a lot more extensive than what you see even in the current aerial photos. Some areas were very successful, and some areas grew for about a year or two, and then the methane got them basically, or their roots got down into something that they didn't like, and they just all shrivel up and died. So it is a challenging area. It's not one, the site needs remediation at some stage, whether that's through controlling the environmental damage or actually remediating the actual ground. I don't have a problem with losing out a little bit of some of the trees. I do think we perhaps need to be a little bit more walk it and see if there are individual trees that ought to be kept. But more importantly, what I want to see, and it's not part of this particular part of the process, is a car park that is well landscaped. I don't want to see a further sea of bitumen replacing you know, something that ultimately ought to be a green space. So at the planning application phase, I would be expecting that a car park layout suitable for inclusion of tree planting was something that should come forward. And sadly, we can't look at both of them at the same time. So there is that aspect as well. Equally, we can't even apparently look at, well, what are the remediation and environmental management conditions that are going to be placed over this site. It is still a contaminated site, and anything that happens to it has to be approved by the environmental authorities, including a management strategy. And I don't know what the detail of that is. I understand that from what's in the report, obviously, that it's considered acceptable, but we won't find out what that means, what the detail means, until after we've dealt with this application, which is my understanding of the process. But this is, I guess, still a proposed lease. There's a way to go. We're at the first phase of it. It's about, I guess, giving our intent as much as anything, and I'm prepared to do that. I have some reservations about the time, but that's going to be dealt with through the amendments. But I just wanted to give that sort of broader overview of the area and the importance of, you know, the whole area and seeing a coordinated development sometime into the future. When we started talking about this, you know, leasing parts of the tip site, that was, I think, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. The view then was that it would probably take 20 years before a remediation of the problems down there were ready for redevelopment, were going to be financially supportable through redevelopment of some description. Well, we're 11 years into that 20 years, and I think we're not actually potentially that far away from the possibility that the tip sites can be remediated and redeveloped. And when I say redeveloped, I just simply mean urban. That will include a very significant amount of open space because it will need to. But it is something that needs to be done in the future. I am concerned that some of the land uses down there are potentially slowing that process down by locking certain bits of sites up for 20 years here and 20 years there, or 30 years here and there, rather than looking to a more comprehensive redevelopment, which is what the area is absolutely going to need sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, just a quick question on the clarification on what we're proposing to lease out, because on page 72 of the agenda, there's a diagram of the different types of, you know, what's going to be, what I'm assuming proposed to be built, and that appears to me to be kind of west of those trees and almost directly behind the Woolies. But if you go to page 71, the arrow indicating the location of the lease is actually on that tip site, and I had assumed that it was on in the brown bit and not down below. But so I just wanted to clarify what that photo is on page 72.
I'll go to the Director, Acting CEO on that one.
Through the chair, it is the diagram that shows the blue and the orange. That is the leased area. That's also reflected in the recommendation. So it's the area reflected in the recommendation, which is the one on page 72.
So in all likelihood, those trees that are there will likely be able to keep most of those.
I'll just get the Acting CEO to respond.
Based on the aerial image we're looking at the moment, yes, the vast majority of those trees don't fall within the leased area.
Okay, so Councillor Archibald, we're not on the amendment yet, we're just still on the item.
Yep. No, I just wanted to make a comment that it is a bit confusing because on page 71 of the agenda, as you know, 71 as the agenda shows, it's got the whole of the tip site boundary, and it's got a little white thing with an arrow pointing to the area. It says location of lease. but in fact the lease is to the east of that orange line. Yeah, so it doesn't match up. It's just a bit confusing. So the trees look like they're in an area that's meant to be leased, but they're not. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. Did we want to continue to discuss the item or go to the amendments? Councillor Lorber?
I'm just going to offer to move my amendment.
Sure. So moving Councillor Lorber's amendment. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Lang? Over to you, Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I had flagged earlier in the week during our informal discussion about this. 20 years to me just feels like a really long time to lock this up, and this amendment would give us some flexibility to look at it with a redevelopment clause potentially in 10 years, and then again in 5, and another one in 5. The other bit is, again, 20 years is a long time, so if this is going to be parking, I'd like to make sure that it's available for use, and if there was an inclination to put paid parking on there, it would require a further decision of council. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully I can have your support.
Thank you, Councillor Lorber. Councillor Graham?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I can't support the amendments on this proposal. This proposal has been put together based on 20 years. Now, if all of a sudden we arbitrarily tonight tell the applicant it's now 10 years, well then, of course, the figures that he has based his financial planning on is gone haywire. And you would more than likely see him or her, whoever it is, him I think it is, walk away from the proposal. You just can't change periods of contract. If the period of contract is 20 years, whether it's a government contract or something like this, you can't expect the applicant to agree, oh, council said it's only 10 years. Now, gee, that's fantastic. I can do that. It's only going to cost me an extra couple of $100,000. I mean, it just doesn't, the reality doesn't work that way. So I think we've got to be very careful here. My view is that you should, the best part, and for 20 years, can I remind people, 20 years goes by very quickly, particularly when you're on council. Is that right, Councillor Thompson? But it's been a vacant site for what, well over 30 years now. It's going to sit there for another 40, 50 years before anyone has the funds to do anything with this site. This council can't do anything. This council won't be able to do anything on this site, God, for 60, 70 years, on its own. So this is a proposal that we should be taking with glee. The applicant's putting in his own money to upgrade and fix up, remediate the site is the word I'm looking for. At a cost to him of over $770,000. Now, the council don't have to pay a cent of that. All we're giving him is 1 year's free rent, which is normal on all our commercial properties. And we're going to get a car park, which we're screaming out for car parks, even though it's in South Fremantle, it's a car park. It's going to be a huge benefit to the people of the area and people who perhaps want to catch that 532 into Freo. So, I mean, we're going against our own sort of principles here by changing the lease all of a sudden, putting on new parameters, which, this has obviously been done in goodwill with the officers. And I just think it's very dangerous to come up now with this amendment, and I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Lang.
Thank you. I'm really indifferent to this proposal as a whole. The idea that we might lock up this potentially strategic site for 20 years for a few extra car bays at Woolworths and receive $20,000 a year isn't really in the benefit of anyone in the city. And in particular, at the moment, we've got a housing crisis and increasing value of lands. There's going to be a point where it is economical to rehabilitate that site and put housing there. And that's an opportunity for the city. So opportunity cost, we're looking at $20,000 a year versus how many tens of millions that block could be worth. And that's what I'm weighing up here at the moment. I acknowledge it's probably not going to happen in the next few years, but it certainly could happen after 10 years. So that's why I did second this. I, I, I think it's important that we don't sign away this strategic site for 20 years for $20,000 a year.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. I've got some questions. I'm not sure of protocol whether they can be directed to Councillor Lorver or to staff as to the inference.
Given that Councillor Lorver can close on the item, I think it would be fine to raise some questions and he would have an opportunity to respond to them when he closes.
Thank you. So I suppose, just a few questions, particularly around point A and the 10 plus 5 plus 5 and what criteria would be applied as part of that, and if that is a only on the city's protocol that can be continued, or whether it's an option that the leasee could choose to take on board if they wanted to take the 5 years. And then on B as well, what particularly does a redevelopment clause mean, and what does it say when, to come into effect at the commencement of the first further term, and for the remainder of the lease? So what would that actually, the detail around that particularly mean? So maybe I'm somewhere in between Councillor Lorver and Councillor Graham on this, in that I understand the premise for putting these points forward, but without some more detail on those, I'm maybe feeling that I don't have enough to support it at this point in time. So I'll listen to Councillor Lorver when he closes, and maybe my overall concern is most probably adding a whole bunch of bays into that development nonetheless, which is an absolute dog's breakfast to get in and out of. And Hampton Road, Duro Road, I can't see that improving through this. So just interested to hear the other views around the table.
Councillor Mofflin, I think the acting CEO might be able to shed some light on the two issues you've raised, so I'll go to him, and Councillor Lorver can add any other things at the end.
Through the Mayor, so the 2 5-year options will be at the discretion of the lessee, not ourselves, so it'll be up to them to choose whether they wanted to take them on. And the redevelopment clause would need further definition in consultation with the lessee.
Thank you.
So just to confirm with the acting CEO, this is effectively agreeing terms for negotiation with the lessee, and would come back to council after that.
Through the Mayor, currently based on this recommendation, it possibly wouldn't need to come back to council.
That's something for us to consider. Councillor Williamson Wong.
I just want to echo that I agree with this amendment. I think 20 years might fly past, but that's my whole lifetime. I don't want to be 41 and have that locked up, because I think that it is a really strategic piece of land, and echoing, Councillor Lang, that it doesn't seem like a smart decision to lock it up. And I also think that the flexibility with that site's important, and its connection to South Beach might be important to consider, in terms of we already need overflow parking for that site. And if this is going to be free parking or with potential paid that we have to consider, it makes sense to kind of approve it on the terms. And again, if we weren't going to see redevelopment in 20 years, then the lessee can just continue to add on those options. But I think would be very helpful for the South Beach overflow parking issues as well.
I might just add a follow-on question from the last two questions for the acting CEO before I go to Councillor Kamada. Do we understand that this will be all-day free parking in the current negotiation and will not be limited to patrons of the shopping centre?
Through the Mayor, it is absolutely intended to be free parking. I would have to clarify that it's not restricted to patrons of the shopping centre.
Thanks. Councillor Kamada?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Fitzhardy. Look, I tend to agree with Councillor Graham on this one, and I must admit I was a bit confused by the different aerial pics that we did have at our disposal, but having a look at the aerial on page 72, I think there's still plenty of scope if we want to develop in that open area further down the track. I think there's plenty of scope for further development, whatever opportunities may arise, and I think Councillor Graham's right, 20 years does go quick when you're looking at this sort of space. I do, however, also agree with Councillor Lorber that if at any stage it was to become paid parking, that the cities should certainly be benefiting from that. But yeah, I just think Councillor Graham's point that you go into negotiations with these sorts of things based on certain criteria, and I think we should be honouring that.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada. Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you on the amendment. First of all, this is an offer and acceptance process. We have an offer from someone that wants to lease the land. It's now our turn to decide what terms we, the council representing the community, want to respond to, accept, modify, change. It's not a scenario where we put the property out and said, who wants to lease it for 20 years? They're our terms. It's an offer, someone coming to us saying, I'd like to lease this bit of land, this shape of land, covering those bits of tree in the handle of the saucepan and not covering any trees in the bulk of the saucepan shape of the bit of land. It suits them. That's fine. That's the process. It's not intended for free general public parking. It's intended, obviously, for the use of patrons of the shopping centre. And the signs that already exist there, which are perfectly reasonable, which say, I think it's 3 hours max, 2 is it? Yep. For patrons using the facilities. It's not for beach parking. It's not for, park and ride to catch the 532 or any of those things. And I doubt very much whether a commercial operator would be in the business of doing anything other. It doesn't make any sense that they would. And that's fine. The notion of the redevelopment clause and why that's important, probably more important than the 10 plus 5 plus 5, is because redevelopment, any redevelopment of that area, first requires remediation. It first requires a clearance of the environmental or the EPA's contaminated site zoning over that land. And so when we talk about a redevelopment clause, what you're actually talking about is that sometime in the next 10 years, the council might want to be in a position to start the process of getting the contaminated site zoning over that piece of land cleared so that we might be able to use it. We might be able to put a footy oval there. We might be able to put community centre there. We might be able to do all sorts of things. But until you get rid of that contaminated site zoning over the site, you won't be able to do anything. And the reason that's important in this conversation is because the way the EPA work is they won't let you carve up a contaminated site into individual sites and deal with them in a piecemeal manner. They will only let you deal with the whole contaminated site and have a plan approved for the whole site before you can do anything. Now, the best that we could hope as a council is that they would let us deal with the 2 tip sites independently, i.e. the Daly Street tip site, which is the one next to where we're talking about. It includes what we're talking about, and the bigger, more contaminated tip site to the south of the bike path. So that's the best hope we can get. They're not going to say, oh, the bit that you leased out, that's fine. We'll just clear the rest of it. They're not going to do that. And that's why it's important that if we want to see anything done with that land in the next 20 years, that we actually put in a redevelopment clause. And I think it's only fair to basically say, look,
an applicant's going to spend a whole bunch of money to build something on that site. In any normal lease negotiation, you work out, well, what's their payback period? What's reasonable? Now, we know when we build at-grade car parks that they pay us back in 3 years' time, 2 years' time, 18 months' time. Now, obviously, the developer's not charging for parking, but it's still a commercial need. They have an absolute desperate need for more parking in that shopping centre, and it will have a payback period. And I think 10 years is probably pretty reasonable in a commercial sense for that. But that's not even what we should be considering. What we should be considering is what's important to us and our community. And I think realistically, we're probably right in assuming that it would probably be, even the best scenario, 10 years before you'd see physical works happening to that contaminated site to remediate it. And we might start the planning for it in 5 years' time. I don't know. It will probably take that long. But 20 years is a really long time to lock that area up, because you're not just locking up this lease area, you're pretty well locking up all of the contaminated site for the next 20 years. And that's why I would urge you to support Councillor Lang's amendment.
Okay, so it's Councillor Lorva's amendment that we're on at the moment. Councillor Lorva, what I'm hearing is that there is different views probably around the room on the lease term and the redevelopment clause. So I'm wondering whether we draft this, particularly the redevelopment clause section, in a way that I can move 2A, 2B and 2C separately and have them voted on separately. So perhaps while you're closing, that's something you could reflect on as a possibility.
Well, the idea of the way that it was structured was that would be give them a guaranteed 10 years before that clause could be invoked. So if you get rid of Part A, I'm not sure what we would be able to link that to. You know what I mean? So would it be in effect from year 2 or year 1? So and given the fact that the leasee has the rights on 5 and 5, you know, it is in effect is still a 20-year lease. So I will speak to closing. So I'm happy to see what they come up with, but those two are kind of linked.
Well,
So,
before you close, I might just get the acting CEO to talk to what might be proposed there to change those words.
So through the chair, we could make a minor amendment to B that is a bit more specific around it being a redevelopment clause that enables the City of Fremantle to consider redevelopment, which defines that clause a little bit more. But Councillor Lorva is correct in that B is linked to A and they would need to be together.
Could we include the words following 10 years in the redevelopment clause? I'm just trying to forecast if A were to fail, but we wanted to keep B, for example. How do we could so.
I mean, perhaps if we deleted.
But just to clarify, just the answer I've got, which I think might be the question you're about to ask, we could put 10 years in section B separately, so that if A were to fail, the redevelopment clause would kick in after 10 years, independent of A.
That would be fine. It could, even if A did pass, then it would still be 10 years. So take out the words commitments of the first further term and say after 10 years. That's what you're thinking?
Correct, and the discretion of the City of Fremantle. We'll just wait for that to go up on the screen because I appreciate this has been a little bit fun to follow.
Could I ask a question, please?
Just let me get this on the screen and then, yeah. Something like that. You're close to the words. Councillor Archibald.
Sorry, it's a question just to do with the actual land area, and I just thought I had time to ask it while they were working that out, but I'll ask it now. I just want to clarify that the area that was coloured to represent the lease area actually covers an area that's already cleared and hard stand. Is that correct? I just want to make sure that's what we're looking at. Yeah, it is correct. Okay, all right. So is it sealed, hard stand, that area?
Councillor Sullivan, I'll get the officers to answer that.
Through the chair, a portion of the land is sealed from a pre-existing lease.
Okay, I think we're getting some words up on the screen here, and then if there's no further questions or speakers on the amendment, I'll go to Councillor Lorver to close once he can see. Yep. So we've got another question on the wording. Councillor Sullivan.
So a question on the wording, commencement, City of Fremantle to commence a redevelopment. Redevelopment could be fairly defined to, like, remediation might not be considered redevelopment. I'm just wondering whether that's actually, whether we should be saying redevelopment / remediation.
Yep, if the mover is comfortable with that. Yep. Okay, any further questions or discussion? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Lorver to close, and I'll just reiterate that I'm planning to move this in 3 parts.
And yeah, well, thank you. And the whole point of having the first bit there, in response to some of the questions, was to allow us after 10 years, if someone said, hey, I want to put $100 million and build a development, do the remediation, it would allow us to entertain that thought and potentially go forward with a higher and better use than a car park and an old tip site. So Part B, in essence, now allows us to do that after 10 years as well. So you know, I'm happy with that, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and having a car park for 20 years is, you know, it's the lowest use of a land, although it is needed right now. We still need to do planning approval for this. What we have is we have a blob on a map. We don't actually have detailed drawings of it. And so I guess what I was kind of hoping is that, I mean, this is the worst car park in Fremantle that I've ever experienced. It's you know, you roll the dice every time you go in a car, which I do because I live in Hilton, and you roll the dice every time you come out. But I guess I'd envisioned that there would be hopefully a connection to Brockman Place to give another exit point there, so that way it's not all funneled through those 2 entry points and cars backing in and out. So when we get those plans, that's the time where we can deal with how that actually looks and how the car park is actually structured. So I'm hoping that will be the case. And I just think that the redevelopment clause, I mean, yes, this is a business decision, but as Councillor Sullivan pointed out, they came to us, and that's what's best for their business. And I just feel like it's our responsibility to do, as Councillor Sullivan said, what's best for our community, and making that unusable for any other use for 20 years. I feel like we're just tying up that site for far too long. So this potentially could be there for 20 years if this passes, but it doesn't have to be if we do get that rare developer that says that they want to do something with the site. The last bit down there as well is there is no restriction for them introducing paid parking, and so I just feel like that's an important bit to make clear, because paid parking does make money, and again, 10 years down the track, we don't know what this is going to look like, and I just want to make sure that if there's an introduction of paid parking, that the council of the day will be able to consider that. So just trying to give us flexibility, but at the same time ensuring that the investment that this business owner who leases out to several tenants is able to provide more parking, but at the same time strike the right balance between us being able and future councils being able to do potentially other things with the site. So yeah, that was.
Thank you, Councillor Lorver. All right, so I am going to put this to the vote in 3 parts. Please leave your hand up until we have worked out who is voting for what. So I'll put part 2A to the vote. All those in favour? So that's Councillors Lorver, Thompson, Van Dawson, Sullivan, Williamson, Wong and Lang. Me also. So that is passed. Sorry. And against. Thank you. So councillors Kamada, Mofflin and Graham against. Councillor Archibald, I'm not clear which way you against. Yep, thank you. Part B, the redevelopment clause. All those in favour? So everyone except for councillors Kamada and Graham, and against councillors Kamada and Graham. So that is approved. And the final special condition, all those in favour? And that appears to be unanimous. All right, so where we've ended up is that all of those were supported with slightly different votes along the way. Am I right? Yeah, good. Just checking with the people who capture these things for the record. Okay, so that brings us back to the item as amended. There is another amendment from Councillor Lang. Before you move this, Councillor Lang, I'm just wondering about a change of wording to what you've submitted. So you've submitted to build a PSP, a Principal Shared Path, which is, I think, the highest grade of path in the hierarchy. I did wonder whether you meant a shared path, which I think would better reflect what the remainder of that path is. Did you want to move your amendment with the words shared path substituted for PSP? It's probably quicker if we just move it with the... Can we do that? Okay. Yep, all right, so we'll move it and then minor amend it. Okay, so Councillor Lang is moving his amendment. Do we have a seconder for that one? Councillor Williamson Wong. Shall we just deal with that minor amendment quickly? So you'd like to move a minor amendment to change PSP to shared path in that and in the reason. Councillor Williamson Wong, are you happy to support that minor amendment? Good. All those in favour of the minor amendment?
Can we, at the very end as well, change PSP?
Yeah, both. Yeah. All those in favour of the minor amendment? Yep. Okay. Okay. Yep. Checking in. All right. Back to the item, the amendment. Sorry, Councillor Lang.
Thanks. In keeping in flavour of the previous comments that I made earlier, I'm still pretty indifferent to handing over this really strategic site for so long. And quoting a number of us in the room have already said tonight, what are we doing here that's in the interest of the community? Potentially we're cutting down a large section of Rottnest Island tea tree, mature tea tree on the site. That's not in the interest of our community. Locking up the site for a car park isn't in the interest of our community. However, if we are to proceed with this, I think the really easy win, and it is a big win, is the installation of this really important connective path that, as we know, has been on the bug agenda for nearly a decade. I note the temporary shared path that exists at the moment was built in about 1985 or 6, I understand. It was built to connect the Fremantle village to South Fremantle for the America's Cup defence. It was kind of a temporary path that was put in, and now I think it's one of, if not the busiest shared paths we've got in Fremantle. I know if we build that path, we are actually going to be helping the applicant. We're going to send more people on bikes to the shop. We're going to free up more car bays. We're going to reduce congestion in that car park, and we're going to reduce congestion on Hampton Road and Dura Road, but also reduce congestion on a lot of the back streets in South Beach Estate. I don't know if many people here have ridden or walked this space very often, but if you were to go from South Beach Estate through Hollis Park, you probably would go down Daly Street, then you've got to come back around Daly Street tip and into Woolworths. It's a real zigzag and a real dogleg you're putting in. But with this path, it makes it a lot more of a direct route for anybody living in South Beach Estate, or for anybody living on Walker Street or Thomas Street or Holwood Street. Any of those people living there I would suggest they'd either walk or ride and use this path. And that would take so many cars off Dura Road and our back streets, which is a big win for the developer as well. I also note that to build the proposal is a ramp that takes cars up from the existing car park onto the Daly Street tip site. So there's going to be a significant amount of earthworks that occur. And I imagine the EPA or whoever they be, whoever the approving body might be, are probably going to be quite reluctant about taking any soil off this site and that as part of that ramp construction. That soil could be used as a foundation or a base for a new path on the hill down from Hollis Park into the site. Also, obviously, while there's new tarmac being laid, there's an opportunity there with workers on site to build a few extra meters of path. Another important point is today on my visit to the site, I just wanted to check out some of the gradients of the area. And obviously, I think Walker Street is the flattest. And then as you move up, you get to Daly Street, which is the highest and steepest site. Then it does start to drop off in this particular location. There is a gradient to the hill, but it isn't that bad. It's certainly not as bad as Holbert or Daly Street, which are currently used by cyclists. On my visit, I also noticed that the rehabilitation works are in a stage where we've got our canopy trees competing with our understory, and that at the moment you can't really see very far at the moment in the park. If you go to Samson Park, there's a bit of a woodland experience, and you can see through the understory because you've got large canopy. You can see 20 meters around, but we've got plants now that are between about 9 years old with a lot of tuits in there, and they are, between 1 meter to say 3 meters, and you can't actually see that far in the park at the moment, which is a bit of a somewhat of a safety issue because you can't see in the park. So where I'm leading to is that if there are concerns about safety in the park, I'd be concerned that we might start cutting some of the trees prematurely. But the other response to antisocial behaviour or safety is more people and activation. So with this path, we would be increasing the traffic through the park, and that will be making the park safer as well, and hopefully protect some of the vegetation from being cut down. The final point I wanted to make here is that this is a really rare opportunity to get a high-use bike path put in, paid for by someone else, that is definitely going to be used by our community. That's a really easy win. And it's something that the Bug have been aware of for a decade, and it's right here, right now for us to grab. And it's certainly something we should be asking the developer to do as part of our lease negotiation.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm new to this process, so hopefully I'm doing this okay. But I just had a couple of questions on the amendment. So the first one is, if we support this amendment, Councillor Lang's amendment, does that make it a requirement of the lease, or is this something that the lease, the proponent could consider, reject, and it come back to us, or is this like this would be a requirement for them to provide this as like is our decision today putting this forward, meaning it forms part of the lease agreement, and if they don't like it, potentially they walk away, or is it an optional? Yeah.
I might get the acting CEO to respond to that.
Through the Mayor. So the decision tonight would be, I guess, giving us direction on what you would like to see in the lease. If the proponent did want to make a change with that, we'd have to bring it back to council again for further approval.
But there is opportunity for it. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. My second question relates to the cost, and I absolutely support this proposal. It's a great idea. Yeah, and to see a construction of a bike path here, yeah, definitely a great idea. I just concerned about whether it's reasonable to put that cost burden on the future leasee. Sorry, I'm new to all these terms. Yeah, so interested to know what the cost burden would be, whether it potentially more appropriately dealt with at planning approval stage, but more just understanding what that burden would be.
Not sure if you can answer that one, whether we've got a cost per metre of bike paths in our head here.
That's a part of it. So through the Mayor, we don't have an understanding of what the path would cost. We need to properly scope it and design it. Also, a portion of the path is not within the leased area, and we're unable to place obligations on the lessee to deliver works outside of the leased area.
Thank you. That was second part to that question was I sort of wondered whether it was reasonable to require works outside the lease area. So thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Sullivan, and then Archibald and Mofflin.
Thanks. I know this is complicated in terms of logistics and who should pay and what, but the principle of this is incredibly sound. It's just a no-brainer in principle. Maybe that's why Councillor Lang had principal shared path instead of just shared path. The logistics, I'm not that worried about in terms of whether they are exactly right in our motion or whether this is something that gets put forward and gets the detail negotiated prior to the final signing of the lease. Bear in mind our resolution actually, states that we're giving the CEO the option to sign off on the lease if during the advertising period we don't get any changes or pushback. But if we don't have this, we'll probably get a lot of pushback from community to say, why don't we have this in there? Or, so one of the things that I think I don't agree that the developer should be paying for the path outside of the lease area. I think that should be our responsibility. But the developer has been the one working with the EPA to try, or Department of Environment, to prepare a management plan as to how works can occur in a contaminated site. It would be crazy for us to try and independently look at a different management plan for a bit of bike path that was 50 metres long to connect the existing bike path to the lease area. It would be far more logical if that space between the lease area and connecting to the existing path was simply included either in the lease and or in the management plan that the developer has been working on with the EPA. Because without the EPA's clearance, we can't do any of this. We can't even put 1 square metres of extra bitumen down anywhere in the tip site without the EPA signing off on it, just about. So my sense is that even if we were to pay for the bike path link between the lease area and the existing bike path, and the developer included the rest of the path, because they would probably be creating space for pedestrians at the least to walk from their cars safely, hopefully, to the shopping centre, rather than just rambling through all the cars like you do in other parts of the car park. We probably want that as part of the planning approval. So my sense is, that this will get sorted out in the wash, but I think it's important to pass a resolution like this because the management plan with the EPA is the bit that's going to be the stumbling block to implement something which is so incredibly logical.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Mofflin.
I thought Councillor Archibald was up and I was gone. And to that point, I was most probably going to turn mine off when Councillor Archibald was speaking. But I'm just most probably interested as to the logistics around the leased area and the non-leased area and how that would all work out. And I'm supportive, absolutely supportive of the idea and the ability for us to connect up through the existing path and into service the shopping centre as well, and to provide those linkages. Just be interested to see how we could actually make this work or not.
Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam. Yeah, look, I'll just put my spin on this one, and hopefully I'm still around in 10 years' time to see some development on this site, considering we've got greater priorities at Fremantle Oval and the Beaconsfield tip site. But anyway, they can wait now. Look, this sounds great. Look, a BSP, shared path, everyone loves them. Let's put them in everywhere. They're great. But again, we're putting the onus back on the provider or the applicant, whatever you like to call it. He's given some figures that are showing that it's costing him over $100,000 a year for 20 years for no return. And at the end of it, the city have got a remediated site and the parking lot all to themselves. You add a PSP, I mean, what's the PSP, let's say here, it'd be 100,000 most probably. You can't get anything for 30,000, so, you know, I won't even ask Mr. Tattersall. So, I mean, look, again, it's, you know, it's expectations exceeding reality. You know, we've got to do business with people, and we've got to try and knuckle down some of these things. We talk about let's being more business orientated, let's getting more things done, you know, and here we are tonight. We've put up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock again, which is fine if that's the way the council wants to be, but we'll end up with nobody wanting to do business in some of these sorts of environments because it's mostly just too hard. So I won't support it. I'll stick where I am with this one because it should not be the leasee that pays for it. It's something that Councillor Lang has said has been a priority. Well, I haven't heard it in 4 years of budget talks, so I don't know where it's been sitting, but you know, it might be in the fine print somewhere, but it hasn't been one that's been knocking on my door in the last 4 years, so I don't think it is a great priority. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillor Archibald?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, I mean, I'm kind of, I think, at the point where I will support this, but only because it will test the desire of the applicant to work with the community and provide something that is of benefit to the community. But the part of it, as has been said, will be outside of the lease area. And I'm just wondering, I mean, if the applicant was to entertain a bike path along there, obviously part of it will be on the leased area, the northern part. Whether they would be willing to entertain a cash contribution that might fund the southern part if it was a simple, perhaps just crushed limestone surface or something like that. I really am not sure how this will go with the applicant, but I guess we can test it and see. I had another thought, but anyway, so I'm feeling like I will support it. That presumably this way the acting CEO can then test the ideas with the applicant, and we can just work out then what is in the best interest of council to carry on. The other option is we consider looking for a budget allocation in the next round that would fund the piece that's not on the leased area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just my comments on this. This is an area that I actually do ride my bike through more than anywhere else in Fremantle, to be honest, because coming down from Beaconsfield, we'll go down Clontarf Road and have to go down Hampton, and you know, which is pretty dodgy at times, and up to the connection near the old Newmarket, is it, hotel, and then through that path, and you know, so basically doing the long leg around. Now, when I look at this, I think it's almost two separate things, and I totally support making connections here. But the area that's outside of the proposed lease area, to me, that's the little bit that's really, really important, because even if that just connects to the car park, then you're in there and you can actually get around the rest of the area. So I think it's something that we need, obviously, a lot more negotiation to get to the outcome that we desire. I agree with Councillor Archibald on that point, that if this does go ahead, and it probably will be supported, then it will be it'll be the trigger to work towards you know, the outcome that we all desire. But I don't want to see it jeopardise the overall motion that we're talking about. So yeah, in principle, 100% support the notion of this. So looking at the actual amendment, the leasee to build a PSP to the satisfaction of the city, I'd just like to see that. I'm not asking for a change, but I'd just like a softening in attitude to that will work together with the proponents to get an outcome that's suitable for the city.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada. Councillor Lawver, then Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I won't repeat what other councillors said about this being kind of a no-brainer and all that, but I do
kind of agree with Councillor Kamada, and I would be willing if the applicant came back and said, you can have that bit of land and we pay for the bike path, because it just makes that much sense to me to have that little connection there to avoid that big runaround on either way. And as was pointed out, this will be to the benefit of the applicant as well. They want more people at their shops. So I think that regardless of how this comes back to us, because the people approached us with this offer, and now we've made some changes. We might make another change. There can be another coming back as well. So I just wanted to flag that in my mind, this little bit of connection is important enough that I would be okay with us paying or offering 2 years, rent free, as long as that connection was made. Because this amendment strikes the right balance, is that we're not asking them to maintain it. We're asking it, we'll maintain it because it's a benefit to the community, but we need to get that bit in there in my mind. So I'm happily supporting this, and hopefully they just want that parking enough that they're willing to do everything in there, and we can just do that last little bit. But I would be willing to entertain other ways to make sure this happens as well.
Thanks, Councillor Lorber. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, look, for $21,000 a year, I think this is hardly worth even considering, to be honest. The only thing I do support in this plan is the bike path, but for the money we're getting, I hardly, to be quite honest, I hardly think it's worth worrying about. So I'm not supportive of it, but I'm supportive of the bike path, and I'd be happy to build that ourselves.
Can I then, if there's no one else to speak, I have a couple of questions I wouldn't mind getting answered, and then say a few things, and Councillor Lang will close. So maybe I can ask my questions, and then if the acting CEO's got anything to add. One of my questions was in relation to the DEWR approval and whether that extends to the point where the paths would connect, or whether it is solely for the proposed lease area. The second part was, if this receives public submissions while it's out for advertising, does that mean, I think as Councillor Sullivan suggested, that will come back to us anyway for a further decision? And then any other comments you wanted to add?
It would be within the leased area only. I will also just clarify, so the $21,000 per annum would be in addition to covering the cost of remediation for that portion of the leased area, which would obviously be taken off our overall contribution to the management of the entire site. So it's $21,000 plus them managing or taking on part of the cost of the remediation.
And it would come back to us if public submissions were made?
Through the chair, yes, it would.
So a couple of things. One thing that's just coming to mind now, which I guess we just maybe need to consider, is the issue of the DWR approval for that remaining section, and whether we make this conditional on that approval being able to be gained. So I'll just leave that out there as something to think about, as maybe a further amendment to the amendment or something. In terms of sort of addressing the concerns that this is putting an imposter on the applicant, I mean, what I would say is it's solving the same problem. The problem is people want to come to the shops and they want to have a way of getting there, and at the moment they're relying heavily on car. I wouldn't even think to take my bike to these shops, whereas I take my bike to the Hilton shops all the time because it's easy. There's bike parking, it's transparent, you know how to safely get there and get away. A lot of people in this area use their bikes for daily commuting, for taking their kids to school, for transporting items around. So while, we imagine Woolworths and we imagine a whole bootload of stuff, it's absolutely conceivable when you've got tenants like the Storehouse, you've got, Aldi specials, goodness knows what, you've got a sushi shop, you've got a whole lot of things down there that people will access and do their shopping by bike. So if I was in the the shoes of the proposed lessor, I would be thinking, how do I get more people onto bikes in my shopping centre? How do I do that? That's the demographic, that's our clientele, that's our catchment. fully appreciate if people are coming from down in Coburn, they might not be coming on their bikes, but how do I, within, the 3 to 4 kilometre radius, how do I say to all those people, it's great for you to come here on your bikes? Because guess what? That frees up a parking spot. And that's great news. So, there's another way of looking at this is the lessor could have come to us and said, hey, we really need a better bike connection to this shopping centre because people aren't using their bikes and we can see a gap in the network here. So I would really say this is something that would be a massive benefit to this shopping centre. It's, as everyone says, it's not a car park you want to drive into unless you really, really have to. So I'm comfortable that we're trying to solve the same problem by doing this shared path, that it actually improves the parking situation if we can get people onto bikes. This is going to end up coming back to us anyway, so I would be very surprised if there are not public submissions on this, which means it's coming back to council, and it gives that negotiation period an opportunity to happen, a bit of a discussion about why this is a good thing, better understanding about what it costs, and the ability to investigate the DWER approval for that remaining section that's not included in the lease area. So I'm happy to support it. I'm happy to take advice as to whether we need to put anything in there about the remaining DWER approvals that would be needed. So it's probably back to you, Councillor Lang.
Thanks everyone for the comments and feedback. It's just been reinforced that while at the start of the debate I was talking about this being what's in it for the community, it's just becoming more and more clear that there's actually an awful lot in it for the actual applicant themselves. They're going to get more customers and have more free car bays. So we're in a negotiation. They've come to us with an offer and we're going back with ours. So this is part of our return to the leasee. So I will close the discussion.
Okay, I'm going to put that then, I think, to a vote as it stands, and we'll leave that DWER issue out there for the negotiation period and no doubt come back to it later. So all in favour of this amendment? So that's easier to count who's not. So everyone apart from Councillors Kamada and Graham, and against? Oh, I can't see your hand. Ben, your head's quite... Councillor Graham, also in favour. Excellent. All right. Still confusing me over there. Okay, Councillor Graham, all those against. Councillor Graham is against. It's okay. We're fine with that. All right, so the amendment is carried. I think I'm clear on who's voted how and all of that. Sorry about that, Councillor Kamada. Was surprised. We're back to the item as now amended twice. Any further discussion on the amended item? I think we're getting there. All right, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Yep. And against? Councillor Graham is against and everyone else is in favour. And so that is carried. All right. Everyone's clear? We know what happened. Thank you very much. We will carry on with the remainder of our agenda. It is not over yet. So, councillors, I might just check with you which items people are planning to speak on. So, Councillor Lang's not planning to speak on any more items tonight? But you don't want to speak on any more items tonight? It's going to be taken as read. So we've got 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. 10 obviously we need to do on its own. Other items people want to speak on?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, just I think people are in the audience for a certain item.
I thought it was the one we've just dealt with, but no. Are you here for Fazari Way? Oh, I wish I'd known.
Yes.
Could have. Well, we'll bring it forward now so that we can deal with that right away. Yeah, it's all good. Just didn't have it written down. All right, I will ask for a mover for C2311 dash. Oh, did you want to speak to that? I didn't have you written down clearly because last chance. Hey, excellent. We're going to bring up the microphone for you just quickly. Councillor Lawver, I'll get you to turn your mic off for a minute.
Thank you. I wasn't prepared to speak, but thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name is Natina Marola, and I'm the applicant for Fusari Way. My grandparents, Fortunata and Giuseppe Fusari, lived at 28 Smith Street for 70 years, as you can see on the proposal, and I'm just thankful for the City of Fremantle for considering naming the laneway Fusari Way. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Nope. Okay, you can.
And this is my dad, Salvatore Fusari.
Oh, goody. Okay.
Who also lived at 28 Smith Street his whole life.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we'll debate the item now if you want to sit down.
Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, do I have a mover for C item 9? Councillor Kamada, and it looked like it was seconded by Councillor Archibald in quick succession. Councillor Kamada, did you want to open debate on this one?
Yeah, for me, it's not much of a debate. I was last night pretty tired and wanting to get to bed before having to get up at 3 o'clock this morning to go to work. And I came across this particular item, and yeah, it was a pleasure to read. It's a fantastic story. It's a beautiful area, and obviously your grandparents are beautiful people and made a real impact on the community. So congratulations for that, and yeah, I support this 100%.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada. Does anyone else want to speak on this item? Councillor Lang, we've jumped to C item 9, just to orientate you. Look, like Councillor Kamada says, this was absolutely a joy to read. I think so often we lose touch with why things are called particular things in our city, and to have this story and this community acknowledgement then of this story, that this has given a richness to the people who've been consulted, and they've felt, you know, engaged in their street in a way that they might not have been before. And the beautiful kind of community aspects around the sharing and the vegetables and all those things, just it was a really nice thing to read. I hope that one of our local newspapers knocks on your door and says, I want to know more about this, because I think it really is genuinely a lovely story. And I congratulate you for taking this initiative. Did you want to speak? Or
I just wanted to, also reflect on what Councillor Kamada said, because it was a really joyous thing to read the application. And it made me reflect, and we don't say it often enough, is that we're a city that, you know, embraces sustainability. But that word sustainability didn't really exist more than 20 years ago in the way in which we use it today. Our community embraces community gardens. A lot of people have chooks and ducks and, you know, grow their own veggies and everything, but they didn't grow up with that. I mean, I was lucky enough that I did, but it's actually ingrained in so much of the history of Fremantle in the immigrant communities that came here, because that was the way of life in Europe as well. And I think we just need to, you know, have stories like this. They need to be told. They need to be told that we weren't the first to sustainability, but we want to learn from the generations of the past. Things like the Tomato Festival that we had here in Fremantle back in the 90s. I think probably Jenny was mayor at the time. They were great celebrations of the kind of sustainability that communities in Fremantle were actively engaged in for generations. So well done, and I hope the family's proud of the name of the laneway.
all right, so I'll put Fusari Way to a vote. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Councillors, see items 6, 7 and 8. Does anyone wish to speak on 6, 7 or 8? Councillor Lorver wishes to speak on 6 and 8. We're just going to do them one by one now. It's fine. Don't be sorry. That's your job. Alrighty. So can I get a mover for the item 6, the lease for the Civic Centre downstairs space? Councillor Lorver to move. Councillor Mofflin to second. Over to you.
Great. And I'll be really brief. I just wanted to comment on this because we talked about investment and return on investment on several items tonight. And
This one I'm supporting because it's going to help activate this key area of the city, and it's not taking anything away from other places. But I just wanted to note that we're as a council investing $90,000 in the fit out, and we're going to be getting $30,000 a year for this lease. So that'll be paid back to us after 3 years, and that's really the only requirement of this lease to go 3 years. So we'll be breaking even when this lease could be broken. So I just want to say we're getting other outcomes from this. We don't always have to think about commercial return when we approve these things, and I think the activation is worth it. But when we do speak about investment in things, it also applies to us as a council. So just wanted to just make those comments.
Thanks, Councillor Lorver. Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I understand Councillor Lorver's comment there, but I think we also need to understand that we built this building where the commercial areas were what we call coal shell. Coal shell meaning as basic as it can possibly be. It's not suitable for use, and to get it suitable to be used, our part of the contribution is that $90,000. So putting in the aircon, the lights, the sorts of things that will always be there. They won't disappear with each lease. We're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on fancy fit out for the shop usage. So it really is just finishing it so it actually becomes, is the correct terminology, a warm shell. So a warm shell, which next time we won't have to spend that money. So it's not as pessimistic as Councillor Lorver made it look. $90,000 is what we realistically need to spend to get it to the point where it's a shell that someone can lease.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Mofflin?
Yeah, I was just going to add and make a similar kind of comment that we're essentially getting someone else to finish off the job of that space for us, and come the end of the 3 years, if they did happen to walk away, we've got a space that's leasable for a new tenant and be able to make a return on that.
Yeah, I agree with those points. I think the other thing that's really pleasing about this and might not have been noted is that this is an existing successful Fremantle business who is expanding. So they're not planning to move from location one, they're planning to expand their business. And I think that is something that, we would absolutely celebrate. There's no vacancy as a result of this, and, that's really good news. All right, councillors, should we put this one to a vote? All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Excellent. Okay, the next item is the item for the Fremantle Park. So mover for that one, Councillor Mofflin, and seconder, Councillor Thompson. And any debate on this one or explanation? Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, just quickly. Just wanted to thank staff for coming back with the governance around payment. I think it was an amendment that I moved at the time when it came to council that we were going to, or the question around supporting. I suppose just another question to add to that, and yes, we're saying in there that we'll get a financial statement, and I just really want to make sure that we have got the appropriate checks and balances and controls in place. What is the process then, within the city and how we operate such that, we receive that piece of paper, we're not automatically, or even, comes to due date, automatically sends, and then we get it retro after the date and those kind of matters, such that, we are actually implementing as per the controls that have been put in place here.
I'll ask the Acting CEO to respond.
Through the Mayor. So the payment is only released upon the Director's verification that the financials have been received, and we have actually already been receiving monthly financials prior to this date.
Thank you. Anything further? No. So I'll put this one to a vote then. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. So that brings us to item 8, public toilets. Is a favourite topic. So I'll get mover from Councillor Lorver, seconded by Councillor Graham. Councillor Lorver, you want to speak on this?
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to thank staff for putting together that information that I requested a few days ago, and it's not always easy to do, but
It really helps me get into a comfortable space on this one. Understanding the frequency of the cleaning that we're getting on this and where the cleaning is occurring was, I think, really, really helpful. And I'll just make these comments publicly because I've said them to various people throughout here. I think on these kinds of contracts, it would be good to see how contracting out might stack up against delivering the service in-house, just so that we know that we are actually delivering the best service for the community at the best rate possible. So obviously that's not what's before us today, and I'm happy to support what's before us today, but hopefully we can have a conversation about what services we can deliver in-house and how we might go about comparing that when we do these contracting out.
Thank you, Councillor Lorber. Councillor Thompson?
Yes, Madam Chair. My only question in relation to this one is that it looks to be a $900,000 difference between the cheapest applicant and the one that we're recommending, and yet the difference in the evaluation is, I think, 77 for the first one for Great Pack or whatever it was called, and 72 for the second one. So for the sake of if I read it rightly, for the sake of a 4 or 5 point difference, we're spending an extra $900,000. Is that right?
I'll seek some clarification on that one. Is it it's not a confidential, the pricing might be. Okay, so we'll need to move to go behind closed doors. If we want to do that, shall we continue? Yep. Hang on just a second, I'll get some advice. Yep, that's okay. So Councillor Thompson's moving that we go behind closed doors to